fall. Well, that's a way to introduce ourselves into this. The new apartment was fantastic. The pretty clean flooring, the new wallpaper, the sterilized unit bath. It wasn't right comparing it to that house where the previous inhabitants from remnants drifted everywhere, but I definitely learned that it wasn't right to scrimp on housing expenses. This was even further from the university, but houses were nearby. I could walk to a convenience store, and there was plenty of street lights. This apartment was brightly lit, even at night, was introduced to me by Karasu. From what I heard, one of Karasu's acquaintances was the landlord for this apartment, and she was renting a room here too. It annoyed me a bit that the room was simply a warehouse, a place to put paranormal cursing equipment apparently, but I couldn't complain. Rent rocketed to 50,000 yen, but it was 6 Takemi 1K with a lofted unit bath, so it was extremely cheap for the area. It had been 1 week since I looked at the paranormal house with Yoichi. Right after noon on a Sunday, on a rare day with no part-time work and no lectures, I opened the window and took in the comfortable breeze as I sprawled out in the empty room. The previous week had passed by quickly. First, I cried to my big sister and borrowed some money and immediately moved here. I didn't want to enter that house ever again, and it was expensive having to hire people, but it was worth it. Furthermore, this apartment walls were so thin that you would almost instinctively want to pick up your neighbor's ringing phones, which made it feel like you were among living people, and you could greet them in the hallways, and if you opened the windows, you could hear the lackadaisical voice of the bamboo pole merchants. Basically, this place was overflowing with life. For me, that was extremely important. As I'd been drained of mental energy to the extremes, I required the comfort of living amidst people. I never met Yoichi again. The night I gave her a lift to the family restaurant and parted ways. Everything about her was a mystery other than the fact that she was a high school student and that her real name was Mitsurugi Yoichi. I spoke with her a bit as I escaped to the train station, but I never found out what was going on with that house. She didn't try to explain, and I wasn't in any hurry to ask. However, I had a strange conviction that something bad was there. Every night I heard something eerie, and I even ate a countdown, but mostly I believed it because of Yoichi's one phrase, "This place is real," that this was not a place I could deal with. I immediately thought that. If you think about it that way, she was why I was able to make the decision to place myself in such a peaceful place, but it was true what they say, that when the blade is no longer to your throat, you regain your curiosity. Now that it was all in the past, I was truthfully somewhat curious. What did she notice? What was the countdown? What is Yoichi anyway? It was hard to explain, but she seemed different from just the occult maniac. She's probably a ghost, but it wasn't like she was getting a thrill out of coming close to danger, but rather she seemed to have no instinct telling her to avoid dangerous areas. In other words, it was hard to explain her as anything but someone wanting to die. Whenever she said something, I felt like the world I believed and lived in was about to crumble apart. Very strong feelings. Sometimes I would take a peek at Ekabuichi, but Yoichi never appeared in the thread. And of course, no one reacted to the thread I'd started, and it had been buried deep to the point where I didn't want to revive it. Krishna descended upon various threads, but he never touched on mine or Yoichi's case. That was real. I wanted to write, but I had no means of proving myself, and I myself felt fuzzy about it, so I kept myself to an ordinary life. Indeed, daily life continued. An increased living expense and an abundance of light and heat. My scholarship was insufficient, so I began working part-time in an Italian restaurant near the train station. I wanted to pay back the moving funds that I had borrowed from my big sis too, so I started working whenever I had no lectures. My city survival began as I worked myself to exhaustion and flung a tired smile everywhere. A week flew by, and it was that sort of day. My first university lecture in a while had just ended, and I was just stuffing my textbooks into a bag when I realized a girl I recognized was staring at me. She was short, yet her breasts were big enough to notice through her clothing. Why do you talk so much about boobs? I'm a guy, and I don't even think about boobs as much as this guy does. Honestly speaking. Anyways, though... Her hair was cut straight with an underline, like a Zakshi Warashi, and her face resembled that of a young middle schooler matching her red-framed glasses. If it's a girl, then why she always think about boobs, but yeah. Who's that? I stared right back at her, and she cleared her throat once and then came over. She started talking, or taking something out of her pocket and then put it back. I saw that it was some sort of paper. She walked to me, standing straight and still, and in the end never took out the piece of paper. She had a bit of a vexed expression as she glared at me, although her baby's face made it look loose in spite, and then clicked her tongue, and then turned away. Hey! I could stop myself from calling out to her. What do you want? Speak up. The straight-haired girl turned back around and said, a voice for her, Idiot. Idiot? Despite being mild-mannered, I wasn't one to stand being insulted by a girl I'd never met before. Why are you being so rude? What's your name? What grade are you? I asked, and she impolitely snapped back, Shut up! It's your fault to begin with. And then she pointed her small index finger at me. It's because of scum like you that these things keep happening like this. Learn your place, fool. Fool? You? After that, she rapidly asked me, Do your shoulders ache? Do your ears ring? Are you able to sleep at night? Was she some sort of doctor's apprentice? Did this university even have a medical college? While I was bewildered, the girl finally put out the piece of paper from her pocket. She stuck it under my nose. I had no time to take it as she ran off like a rabbit, and by the time I picked it up, she had already left the classroom. The hell was that? No one was left in the classroom by then, so I looked at the piece of paper I held. It was like a handmade business card. It just read, Beatnik Research Club President, Komurado Shina, and had the location of Beatnik Research Club situated on the western wing. That night, I saw a dream. In my dream, I was still living in that house. The old 3-story mountain cottage by the riverbank. There, I was looking at myself. It was like I'd spiritually departed from my body and was floating in space and was gazing upon me living my life. The me down there showed no signs of noticing me and continued living normally. It seemed I was watching a bit of the past. I was living carefree as I had learned to have the fear of the noises at night. Hey, come on, stop with this house. I wanted to tell him, but as a person just drifting in a dream, there was nothing I could do. All I could do was observe. Eventually, I noticed that Yoichi was sitting next to me. The two of us were sitting together on the old sofa I'd picked up after moving. The two of us didn't speak to each other, instead just going on with our lives individually. I was yawning as I watched TV, while she was just quietly reading an old book. It was just a dream, so it was free to make up any situation it wanted, but I still thought it was odd. However, I also accepted that if I were to live together with her, neither of us would really interfere with the other. Eventually, the me down there got bored of the TV and proceeded to stretch, wash his face, and brush his teeth. I thought about studying a bit, but instead, I just immediately went to sleep. I observed myself as an outsider. I realized that I was a pretty boring person. I boasted that I would turn the fortunes of my family's lumber business, that it was downtrodden and was departed, Soon Zoiku, in opposition of my father and big sister, failed to get into the seminar I wanted and wandered to cold sites. Okay, I need to reread this. I boasted that I would turn the fortunes of my family's lumber business that was downtrodden and had departed. Shoizuku, in opposition of my father and big sister, failed to get into this seminar I wanted and wandered to cold sites. Plus, I hadn't even written a single letter to my mother, who I'd promised to send letters to after coming to Tokyo. Finally, I'd moved into a haunted house because of the low rent and run into a psychotic girl. I wanted to slap myself. As I sighed and glared, I quickly curled up into my bedroom. Even though Yoichi was there, it seemed I could not see her as I turned off the light. Yoichi seemed to notice the light had gone off as she closed her book and stared into space. I floated down to Yoichi, thinking I'd turn the light on for her. It's about time. I had a bad feeling from Yoichi's words. And then, in the darkness, with only moonlight illumination, I heard that sound. From somewhere, the sound of something being scraped. An ominous melody ringing across the border connecting the world and the other, this world and the other. As if something was trying to crawl out of a scaled dimension. As I heard the sound, my body slowly froze. It was like watching those supernatural shows on TV where they set up a camera in rooms that ghosts are rumored to appear. This dream, isn't it bad? I need to wake up soon as possible. Because if I stay here like this, I would see that something was engraving numbers into this house. I frantically tried to wake up. I waved my limbs around trying to touch something, but I could not wake myself from the dream. It was like my body had been caught by something black hand seeping out of a different world. Feeling the despair of having been locked into a room with no exit, but then in my dream, only my panting echoed. And suddenly, I found myself next to Yoichi. On the old leather sofa, Yoichi and I were embracing each other. As if I were trying to stain both of my palms with Yoichi's body temperature, I played with her body. That was my wish, and yet it wasn't. I mean, of course I had some interest in girls as a simple 18-year-old boy, but my lusting wasn't this twisted. I wasn't the type to release my sexual lust by turning myself into an unseen existence. I was pretty sure I had that much reason in me anyways. However, Yoichi showed no signs of fear. If anything, she was in a state of ecstasy. Her expression was dangerous. I felt my reason making sounds as it broke apart. I heard my reason making sounds as it broke apart. I licked Yoichi's skin, I curved her breast through her clothes, I lusted over her soft body with the tips of my fingers. Yeah, I don't feel weird reading this. I pulled up her lawn skirts, showing her white thighs. Yoichi's eyes were barely open. Her lips were slightly parted, and I could see her white teeth. Stop, stop, stop. I screamed from within my body, but I couldn't restrain my abnormal extreme lusting. However, the moment I placed a hand on her white wrist, I almost screamed. My arms were not ones I'd become accustomed to seeing, but rather were long and thin, if anything like that of an aged man. These sleeves were gray and worn. I was wearing an old suit. I felt like I faintly smelled some cologne. I stretched out my trembling arms and felt my face, my nose, my lips. And what I felt was hideously not mine. It was definitely that of someone else. And I knew who it was. Him. That man existing at the edge of my vision, and finally my face tilted against my will. My face pointed towards the window ahead, towards the moonlight. And my eyes locked with the man covering Yoichi. That instant, I lost consciousness. Along with incredible trembling, I woke up. It was my new apartment with the abnormally bright lighting from the lamp. To my side was a coffee table with the empty box of the convenience store meal I'd just eaten, and an unfinished bottle of cologne tea. Let's see. Near my pillow, textbooks and notebooks for university had been tossed about. There was a cheap curtain between me and the sash of the small veranda, and it swayed a bit from the night breeze coming through a gap in the sash. I breathed deeply. My heart was still pounding. I came home from working a bit and then had fallen asleep. Fuck off was scaring me. I felt malice towards no one in particular, and grabbed the bottle. I gulped down the third or so that was left of the blonde tea. I felt incredibly thirsty, and even the lukewarm blonde tea tasted delicious. When I finished, I felt a bit calmer, and I scratched my hair as I exhaled sharply. It's funny that you said that because I was scratching my hair right when that happened. Calm down. Just a dream. It was just 2 weeks ago. It's not surprising to have some fear still in my heart. That's why I saw that dream, that's all. I mumbled to myself in an effort to persuade myself, but my heart didn't stop pounding. I could still feel Yoshi's soft body in my hands. Then I realized that something was ringing in my head. It was like a phone from next door. Like a cell phone in my pocket. It was still ringing. But quiet. But definite warning sound. What's bothering you? I looked around. New white wallpaper surrounded me, and there was just a spacious facing room that I hadn't been able to fill with furniture. Nothing had changed between before and after I had slept. However, the bell inside my head kept ringing. What is it? I stood up and looked around the room again. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The after effects of the scary dream were just bothering me, that's all. I was trying to think that when I noticed it, next to the wall was a ladder leading to a small loft. The lighting for the loft was different, so it was slightly dark there. Just then, I felt something cold travel down my spine. Why did I pick a place with the loft? The dark area where it felt like someone might jump out at me from gave me bad thoughts. However, it felt like the warning inside me was directed straight at the loft. I mustered the courage to look up, and the warning sound grew louder. I swallowed once again and turned off the light to the loft next to the ladder. Turned on. I placed a foot on the ladder, climbing it one step at a time, and then I willed myself to look into the loft. Of course, there was no one in the loft. The only thing there was a cheap sleeping bag I'd bought instead of a blanket and a number of books that were scattered about. Ha ha! I breathed with relief and was just about to climb back down when I noticed it. On the other side of the sleeping bag, at the furthest wall, I saw something. Wounds. 2 lines had been violently drawn. I screamed as a silent scream as I tumbled from the ladder. I made a loud scream as my knees and shoulders struck the ground, but I didn't care. Somehow, I managed to grab my wallet and my cell phone, and I jumped out of the door. And yep, not lines. Those weren't lines. That was... two. The number 2. I even moved, but the countdown continued. I jumped into the night city and ran to a convenience store in search of light. As I ran, I tapped out my cell phone, accessing Ikabayuchi. And then I looked at the forum from end to end. I didn't care if it was Kawasu or Sue or Yoichi or anyone. I desperately looked for someone I knew. And then I saw it in a thread-tiled, mysterious dimension. Itsugu, a mere 3 minutes ago, Yoichi had posted. Ignoring the serious discussion of how is to see Yatano Kage and the card I posted there. Hey Yoichi, help me! The occult maniacs who had their debate interrupted laughed at my spontaneous post, but I ignored them. Yoichi, you're reading this, aren't you? Talk to me, he's still following me? But of course, Yoichi never answered, and it just angered the Itsugu maniacs. Even after researching the convenience store, I looked around Ikabayuchi while I was in the parking lot. I tried writing in places that Yoichi might find interesting, to contact me immediately. But maybe I'd posted too often because the entire forum rose up in arms calling me a spammer. If I got banned, I'd have trouble contacting her, so I started responding, no, I'm not a spammer, I'm seriously in trouble, but people just coolly respond that was spamming. Eventually, others began calling me wannabe, and I got pissed off and shouted at them, you Skywalker maniacs, and then flames continued. It was like 100 versus 1 as the flames continued being spat. Right? I didn't really think that this situation was going to break into an internet troll war. Right as I was feeling like the world was against me and I was about to land my phone against the ground. Are you Nagi? Someone wrote that. Then I looked at the name. It said Krishna. That name was like a miracle descending upon me, and I almost crumbled to the ground. I tried to type a response, but my fingers were trembling too much. As I struggled like that, Krishna posted again. And it said, come to the place written on the card I gave you this afternoon. Oh. So they are the same person. Oh, no. Krishna's the person who was with the glasses, right? It was past 2 a.m. I left my bicycle behind, so I plodded my way to the university on foot. Of course, the front gates were closed, and the security guard looked at me suspiciously. In any effort to escape from that look, I took a wild arc and then went along the fencing towards the line of Zelvic trees on the left. After you walk a bit here, you get to the western wing, which housed the Benton Research Club room. So yep, it's the girl with the glasses from earlier. Kuramoto Krishna. I was so careless. I noticed nothing. That the administrator of Akaroichi Krishna was a person who attended the same university. And for that baby-faced girl to be Krishna was unimaginable. I went straight to the furthest room and was shocked when I entered. There were still some students inside chatting with each other. I felt a bit exasperated as though this was some sort of never-night castle, but I guess it was just the way in for students, and so I felt a bit embarrassed about myself still being afraid of ghosts. My feet felt heavy as I arrived at the Bagdink Research Club on the 3rd floor, and I saw lights on the other side of the smoked glass. I knocked on the door and heard a familiar voice, so I said, "It's Nagi Yamato Nagido." It's open. Let's see. It's open. Excuse me. When I opened the door, I found myself facing an empty, concrete-walled room of about 10 tanamis. There was a single steel cabinet placed against a wall. In the middle was a relatively large work table, and there were 4 seats placed around the table and 3 people seated. In the middle was the baby-faced girl who given me a business card in my classroom. The red-framed glasses were as odd as usual, but she was wearing what seemed to be a priestess outfit stained in black, had on a tagetta, and sat on the seats. This suited her too well. I had no interest in such types, but I could almost understand how people who like lolis and people who like cosplay felt, which was scary. Are you Krishna? I asked, and the girl made a disdainful face and nodded. I warned you to leave the house immediately. Huh? Karasu told you nothing? Nothing at all. And then Krishna cutely clicked her tongue and said, well, come in. I looked around the room again, and next to the small, cold-sided administrator was a woman who seemed to be in her late 20s and not seem like a student wearing simple white Eastern clothing, and a bald middle-aged man wearing a monk attire who, no matter what, looked nothing at all like a student. I didn't know how to greet them, so I just stood bewildered at the entrance, and Krishna made a motion with her small chin to sit there. I sat down in the chair to have been prepared for me, which had been prepared for me. When the middle-aged monk stood behind me and grabbed my shoulders with his thick arms. Hey, what's going on? And then Krishna pushed her glasses up and asked, "Why are you trying to see the other side of your own accord?" On your own accord. And then began lecturing me in a stern voice. Alright, as long as we don't look, they can't see us either. You can have interest in the occult. It's natural and avoidable of people that have interest in things that are little understood. Still, the other side is the other side's business. To them, not being able to see does not count as an excuse. Even if you can't see them, humans have enough power to be able to feel them. This is eerie, then immediately understood that there's something you can't see and pay its due respect. In that trace of her stern look, the fool could understand. So basically, I've been possessed, I asked tearfully. At this rate, you're pretty screwed. Her expression became even sterner and I froze. Krishna? Said a woman in white clothes. Krishna! She had no makeup on and held a strangely shaped rosary in her hand. Let's see, I don't know how to voice scare, I'll say it. I'll just talk normally until I see her or don't see her. It's already gone a bit inside. What? What inside? Can you pull it out here? I'll try. The two of them finished their strange conversation. Wait, Krishna, who are these two? I asked as I tried to escape from the strong monk. Investigators for Inkmoichi, answered Krishna bluntly. Investigators? I'll explain later. Just shut up and stay still. It's no use. The host isn't here. I heard a female voice from far away. We have to go to that house. You're right. The middle-aged man in Christina's voice also echoed a bit like a record that was losing some speed. I'd begun to slump down. The monk was strong, but that wasn't the only reason. It was this: I had never noticed that I was on the verge of toppling over with extreme weight, and as soon as I realized that my body's senses frantically tied to show me the level of exhaustion I felt that sort of exhaustion, one that tried to sink me into a bottomless pit. You can't move? Then don't move. Krishna said in a mysteriously kind voice, and then I lost consciousness. Oi. To be honest, I don't remember much after that. I think I was loaded into a car. And then I think there was a lot of shaking. My consciousness came back because I felt a familiar sense of cold on my skin, one that seemed to want to wring me dry. My body was still heavy and my consciousness felt like mud, but my life instinct seemed to shout, "This place is bad." When I came to, I was in front of that house. The middle-aged man was carrying me on his back, climbing up to the stairs to the second floor. No, I don't want to come here anymore. I wanted to shout, but in reality I couldn't even move my fingertips. Not caring for my will, I was carried forth by the middle-aged man and stood in front of the entrance to that house alongside Krishna and the white-clothed woman. Krishna easily opened the door. I thought I'd locked the door, but it opened without a key. Inside glowed an ethereal light. Who? Said Krishna sharply. I forced shut my resistant eyelids. No, I don't want to see. I didn't care who was inside. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I give up. I decided right there and then, if I were able to wake up safely tomorrow, I would go straight back home to Shizuoka. In the end, it was impossible for me to live alone in the demonic city Tokyo. I wanted to turn around my fortunes and my family business and gain to Tokyo to study for it, but I'm too much of a wuss to live alone. I'm better off living in the rural area surrounded by family and friends. My father and sister opposed my decision were right after all. Mother supported me, but I felt apologetic towards her. But I tried my best, but these happenings, I couldn't expect them, and I couldn't do nothing.
Come inside and close the door.
I'm guessing that's her. Someone said from inside the house. I recognized that voice. Cold, clear, but somehow decisive.
If you want to know what's to happen, then you should do that.
Right, this voice. Yoichi. My whisper echoed through the silence. Yoichi. Yoishi's lactose voice saying good evening overlapped Krishna's incredulous voice. There was a spare key. Let's see.
There was a spare key near the sewer entrance below, so I used that to come in.
Let's go in. At Krishna's voice, the middle-aged man entered the foyer while carrying me, and then he took me off his shoes and continued at the living quarters. Krishna and the white-clothed woman followed behind. When I looked past the middle-aged man's shoulder, I saw Yoichi already sitting in the middle of the empty living quarters with a candle inside an empty can. The dim light came from that. Who are you and what are you doing here? Krishna sounded as if she were scolding, but Yoichi answered lackadaisically again.
Quiet. If you brought that person here, then you two already understand what's going on in this house.
Yoichi, I see, Krishna groaned. You're Yoichi. You're the child posting on Kabarichi. Yoichi continued her silence, but Krishna clicked her tongue and continued. I have no problem with you having interest in the occult, but having interest in actually tiptoeing the edge is different. You should realize that you're playing in a hazy boundary.
No worries.
Yoichi flatly responded to Krishna's harsh tone.
I have confidence solely in that conviction.
Wow, she's undeterred by this angry Krishna. This is why girls are scary. My big sis was scary too, and when mother snapped, she was scarier than father. However, Krishna sounded a bit lonely. I know. I've seen children like you before. That's why I say it. People who harbor expectations from the depths of the darkness. They always drag humans into the darkness too, even if they don't mean to. That's extremely dangerous. So yeah, she's a ghost and all that we all already knew. The middle-aged man slowly let me down from his shoulder and laid me by the wall in the same posture, and I had nothing to do but listen to their conversation. My powerless body felt like I was being dragged about, and I could only feel an endless sense of helplessness. What happened here? What's happening here? What's about to happen here? Everything was off the rail my life had been following. I could do nothing here. All I could do was listen to the creepy conversation and be an observer to a creepy act. However, more than the desire to learn the truth, my desire to run away was stronger. As soon as possible, I wanted to go out into a right place.
Krishna.
Just then, Krishna. Just then, the monk stepped in between the two. It started. Really fake accent there. Along with his words, the sound began. From somewhere in the building, that sound echoed. Scratch. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Scratch. As if overpowering everything, only that sound echoed. Scratch, 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 scratch. Something was grinding together. Something was carving together. The sound was the loudest I'd heard. Almost as if something was trying to crush this place from outside, and I frantically looked around. I was completely in tears, and only the creepy sound filled the world. Please stop, forgive me. As I started tearfully screaming, Yoichi said,
Wonderful.
Her happy voice entered my ears, and I became enraged. Wonderful? Are you seriously insane? It's beyond sanity to sneak into a house with a ghost milling about using a single candle and just sit there. Oh, I get it. You're that. You're like a friend of a ghost. Then great, can you tell your friend to stop scaring me? I'm sorry for barging in your house, but I didn't know. I cleaned up after myself and left, so stop bothering me and go away. I mean, tell a friend to stop following me to my new place and giving me a countdown. I don't know what sort of grudge they have against the world, but I'm completely unrelated, so stop, tell them. Of course, my body wouldn't move, and neither would my mouth, but I begged Yoichi with my all. However, Yoichi didn't understand my feelings at all.
Hey, scared?
I heard an inexplicable, hopeful voice in my ear. It seemed Yoichi had come right next to me, but I couldn't open my eyes, so I screamed at her with my soul. Of course, I'm scared. I'm super scared. My body won't move and I don't get it. It's some sounds echoing through my head and only psychos and ghosts are around me. Right, this house only has psychos now. A psychotic administrator that gathers and edits creepy articles. A psychotic woman holding some sort of bizarre weapon despite being of age. Some psychotic badly seems to have muscle building as a hobby, and you are covered in black straight hair from the wear. Psychotic girl. And there's some douche ghost that never shows itself but does annoying pranks like carved numbers. Seriously, cut that shit out. Are you just enjoying your emergency offline meeting right now? You're all just waiting for me to pee my pants, aren't you? Hey, come on, cut it out. I was wrong. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to see those numbers anymore. Next is 1. Then what? What next? I don't know. I mean, if you're gonna kill me, then just do it. Stop cornering me and shit. However, at some point, the sound had stopped. My dark world with my tightly shut eyes had become filled with silence. What happened? I became worried that everyone had left, but I was also afraid that if I were to open my eyes, something else would be there. Still, I couldn't stay just like this. I was tired. I'd begun to feel reckless. If you're gonna kill me, kill me. I don't want to get cornered and hunted like this. Just give me a bad end already. I opened my tearful eyes, but I just saw a house unchanged from before. And everyone was there. Krishna stood in the front of the door to the bedroom. The white-clothed woman stood in the middle of the living room with her eyes closed. The monk lingered by my side, and only Yoichi was looking at me with no emotion. Everyone was standing at the same spot they were before I closed my eyes. I gazed with my teary eyes at Yoichi's eyes, then she nodded. And then she looked down. I followed her sight to my feet. As if cutting across the space between my feet, a thick wound had been carved into the floor. I screamed and pulled my sluggish body away, but my hip wouldn't respond, and so all I could do was flail in place. However, I tried to scramble away anyways. You know what's coming? It was... 1. The end. I'm tired of this. I want to go home. I want to go back to Shizuka.
Calm down, Nagi.
Krishna. Calm down, Nagi, said Krishna. At some point she started calling me Nagi, but I didn't care as I tried to crawl away. I was too busy trying to flee from the number. No, what's the point of staying here? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen to me? Get a grip, Nagi. Krishna sounded again. God damn it, it must be the monk. Some heavy impact struck my back. And after that, the white-clothed woman said something I couldn't understand. It was filled with strange rhymes I'd never heard before, countless words that made my head go insane. But then, as I frantically flailed about, a long black skirt blocked my way. It was Yoichi, dressed in obsidian as always.
Move.
Move. That's me. I said with a trembling voice, but this time it was not glass beads. It was not glimmering, but rather this time Yoichi was a fascinated look as she reached out with her hand.
Give me that.
That,
What you're holding. That.
she said, and I looked at what I held in my hands. There was the key to the apartment. It was a key I'd left in my pocket. I was holding it backwards, and on the end of it was a wood. For a while, I didn't know what it meant. And then the wood fell off into the one that had been cut ominously on my feet. What? No way. No way that...
Yes.
Yoshi said in a whisper.
The one that was carving numbers into the house was always you.
With those words, my consciousness was filled with white. In other words, it was a schema. It was an evening roughly 5 days later. Krishna was talking to me in the B club room of the university. Or rather, a reverse schema. The house made people uneasy. Krishna said I was facing each other in the room under the light from a pretty dawn. The house makes people uneasy? I repeated like a fool, and Krishna nodded. In the past, Ikebaichi investigated similar places too. The structure of the building causes changes in the human psyche towards anxiety. There are actually a number of them around the world. Some of them turn to murder scenes, and others turn the people within into criminals. There's no actual scientific proof for their relation, but I'm sure of the opinion that they exist. People's minds, after all, are hazy things that you can easily manipulate into leaning one way or the other. Well, wait a second. What exactly do you mean? Basically, the building wasn't built for people. I felt something like a cold hand gripping my heart. I'll avoid saying the name here, but the architect of that building had actually received architecture tours during his time in university. People had high expectations of him. And for people who are just coming in, this game is a visual novel made by the people who made Steins Gate, Seiyuu no Uda, etc, etc, etc. Alright. This is only the first chapter, though. Krishna was illuminated by the golden sunlight, and her straight black hair glared as she spoke in remembrance. He was supposedly a very serious person. Maybe too serious. He was the type of person that wondered what buildings are, and he would lose sleep pondering that. He loved the joyous faces of landlords so much and worked in hard. This is a fan translation, so the translations aren't that great here. Alright, however, he realized the futility that arose when one person asked him for another design. As he saw the house he put blunt soul into would be demolished in the name of renovation. Families changed, preference changed. It's unavoidable as long as you're living, but he couldn't take it. If you take care of it while living, it would last over 100 years. Sometimes people should suit themselves to the house. He left those words and is said to have vanished from his atelier one day. Weird. His family put on a search request, but no one could ever find him, and some years later he was effectively declared dead. That was over 30 years ago. The atelier was his final work, and had at some point been dubbed the House That Grants Wishes. Christina pointed out the third-floor window towards the residential district. This country tossed aside countless traditions along with its merging agricultural revolution. Yeah, teaching about, I guess, the ways that houses are built in architecture. You gotta know sometimes about the hauntings. I'm of the opinion that one of those traditions was the house. Tiled rooms became scarcer over the years, and buildings that housed several generations became rare. Mass production, mass consumption, that was the era we'd entered. We were inheriting treasures anymore, believing instead that you could resist life every few decades. No, not that. After all, the sufficed for supply and demand, but I think things that were important to the people of this country faded away more and more. After I heard her words, I thought, my father was saying the same. And now we stare at a valley that I guess is right next to where we are. It takes 30 years to grow a sturdy tree, a single sturdy tree. And yet, the Japanese lumber industry found itself in danger of going out of business in the face of cheap lumber being imported. It wasn't that he was worried over his job, he was afraid that the idea that you could get an unlimited amount of cheap wood would become ingrained in the minds of the people of his country. In the past, people would pray to the gods of forest, would cut trees while offering thanks, and carefully built houses with them. Whether you were rebuilding, they carefully tried to reuse wood whenever possible. Even on this earthquake-riddled island, our Yuji had remained standing for 1,000 years. The skill of the carpenters who understood the finest details and characteristics of wood in the day were of course amazing, but they also stated that the graciousness towards the important offerings of nature was just as important. I always agonized over having been born into a family whose business dealt with lumber. Did I take care of buildings as I grew up? Did I ever think about the feelings of those who created the building? I was filled with emotions as I wondered if a day would ever arrive that his wish would come true. With his grand city where every day you could see the sights of reform or reconstruction. According to Krishna, everything originated from the design of that house which contained the intent of the architect. When an architectural friend of Krishna took a look, they noted that while it looked simple, it used extremely high-level techniques. They said that the groaning of the house was to give it durability against hurricanes and earthquakes, along with a bit of playfulness to deliberately make it groan. The meaningful space under the stairs is the center point of a sturdily built house. The kitchen, which gets abused the most, was deliberately omitted. The living quarters were deliberately designed to interfere with daily routine. It was certainly a house constructed for durability. Krishna mumbled as she pushed her red-framed glasses up. Normally, houses should revolve around the inhabitants, but not in this case. People naturally began to feel like the house was built for something other than themselves, and that was enough to psychologically rattle people. So what happens when a boy who just recently came to Tokyo, who has no friends, decides to live there? So, in other words, it had nothing to do with Ghost? Indeed. You're much more mentally fatigued than you probably realize, having moved to a city alone. You may have felt fear at first, but you probably tolerated it. But eventually you reached the limit, and then what do people do? Krishna looked at me with her big eyes. They create a reason for escaping from fear. Create a reason? Yes, they create a reason for the sounds. In other words, you were subconsciously carving numbers into the walls of the house at night. But I was speechless, and Krishna leaned closer. Think about it, Nagi. Where does fear come from? It comes from the unknown. That's why people learn. They research inexplicable things to escape from fear. People's knowledge was born from effort devoted to escaping from fear. Cooking developed out of fear of starvation, clothing developed out of fear of external temperature, and buildings and weapons developed out of fear of enemies. Everything began from human fears. You thought there was an inexplicable sound at night. However, no matter how much you searched the house, you couldn't find a reason for the sound. Of course, you'd have to know that the house was deliberately designed to make sounds, but you had no way of knowing. Then what do? You were cornered, so you create a reason for the sounds. In other words, a reverse schema. Is that even possible? No, it had to be. Otherwise, how would the numbers 4 have been carved into the back of a shoe I'd been wearing all along? I was wearing it, so I had to have been me. My lower body was trembling. It terrified me, the other self that acted irrespective of my will, or rather that I didn't understand myself. Well... Krishna sat back down and sighed. It was partially my fault for leaving a building like that alone, even though I knew it existed right near me. Sorry, she said as she bowed her head, which flustered me. No, stop that. It all started with me being greedy because I wanted to skimp on living expenses and didn't immediately move out. Please raise your head, I frantically said. It was your fault, she nodded. There are no shortcuts for granting wishes. I could give no retort and just groaned. However, I realized there was one question that had been answered. Wait. What were the numbers counting down? And why were the numbers counting down? And then Krishna shook her head, saying, Who knows? Huh? You don't know? I asked, and for some reason her big eyes glimmered with amusement. I don't know, but I think you'd probably carved a cross on the wall. A cross? Not a 7? Right. The number 10. It's possible that it might not have been meant to be a number to begin with. It probably didn't matter to you. Your fear was elevated by carving anything into the wall to act as the source of the sounds. However, this is why this incident came forth, a little bit of coincidence. On the place you carved, there was from the start, out of pure coincidence, a scratch. Subconsciously, you remembered where you carved cross, yet when you woke up, it combined with the original scratch to create 7, and that was what gave birth to something else inside you. A ghost. So that's why I felt so incredible amount of anxiety when I first saw that number. However, there was one piece of this puzzle missing. Like, the man. The elderly man, that piece of the puzzle is still missing here. The feelings of having encountered something far beyond my threshold that I could not reason out. After you continued carving letters in the wall in accordance to the sound you heard after sleeping, the countdown was probably because of your subconscious desire. If the numbers went up, it would continue forever. You were probably hoping that it would eventually stop. After that, Krista had a bit of a mischievous look. But you're quite simple. If the countdown ended, you may have ended your life. I'm glad we made it in on time. And with that, she showed me a soft smile for the first time. Alright, if you had enough of this, don't enter the world of ghosts out of curiosity. And as with living people, pay respect to all existence. Sis, that's the main mode of Akabaichi after all. And the Krishna who said that with complete seriousness matched the image I had of Krishna the person. Yeah. Although, she had a more Mo character appearance than a big brother or father. And with that, the complex, tangled thread had been solved. It's not solved yet. There's still 2 pieces that are missing, but I think that's gonna come up in a second. First of all, who the fuck is the old guy? And second of all, I feel like the dream is hinting at something major, so yeah. According to Krishna, she realized that the building caused anxiety in the psyche of the inhabitants the moment I made my first post. In an effort to keep it under wraps, she had left it in Karusu's hands, but Karusu was pretty careless to begin with, and then became drunk, so the important message had not gone across to me, which is why things escalated to this point. In any case, everything was solved, so that was good. I'll give you a warning, though. As I was leaving the house, Krishna had told me. You don't seem to have much tolerance for this area. Maybe I shouldn't be saying it as an administrator for an occult site, but you shouldn't delve into the occult genre too much. Find friends in Tokyo with whom you can bond, get a girlfriend, and construct a proper solid identity while you dabble in the occult as a hobby. That's the way to do it. Especially, avoid that girl named Yoichi. which sounded about right. As Krishina said, Yoichi was abnormal, so she's obviously about to become my best friend forever. She was, to put it frankly, like her feet were planted firmly on the other side. That was probably why those urban legends popped up all over her odd level of concentration on the paranormal. The sunset was extremely beautiful as I stepped outside of the west wing. The clear orange color shone straight to my soul. Dang. I'd become easily moved by this incident and almost came to tears, just out of graciousness towards peacefulness. I hung on willing myself against crying. There were a lot of students about, and the feeder high school was just on the other side of the gate to the west wing. There was a number of high school girls going home too. I didn't want to embarrass myself as a university student. But then I realized one of them was staring at me. Her black hair was pretty, she had white skin, and was slender. Her uniform figure was blinding, and just by standing, she looked like she was from a different world. Wait, what? I eventually realized I recognized the girl and couldn't restrain myself from running to her. Wait, are you Yoichi? And then girl turned her glass bead-like eyes to me.
Oh, you.
Her sleepy response made me realize she wasn't looking at me. Yoichi was wearing a school uniform, and perhaps as a fault of her own looks stood out, even in such an appearance she seemed distant from daily life. Hey, what a coincidence. You attended our feeder school? What year are you? I spoke to her with a full smile.
That has nothing to do with you.
Yoichi's response was quite cold. There was none of her bedazzled, vitality-filled look anymore that she had when looking upon the paranormal.
I hadn't come to school in a while, and I shouldn't have come at all,
she said with annoyance, and I noticed she didn't have the sharp smell from before. It seemed she'd taken a bath. Glossy hair, an iron white blouse, and a black tie. I narrowed my eyes as I gazed at the contrast from before and said, "Pretty good."
What is?
Your looks. You look more clean and your uniform suits you. However, Yoichi turned her back to me, saying I was pathetic. I intended to praise her, but it apparently just annoyed her.
If it's nothing, I'm going.
She turned on her heel, and I hurriedly stopped her. You were staring over there. Did you want something from Krishina?
Krishna?
She seemed to react to that word as life seemed to return to her glass beads.
I see. Aikaibuichi is here.
Her response to the occult was pretty good. I felt like I was being driven mad as I continued talking in that direction. I'm indebted to you a bit, too. I heard all about the house. I didn't know there were things like subconscious confusion over a building. Man, I freaked out a bit when I learned the truth. I was probably on the high from having been released from my fears. I kept talking. I talked on and on, everything I had heard from Krishna, the truth about the incident, about the architecture of the house, about the will of the architecture, and even about the problems of contemporary Japan. However, Yoichi didn't react at all. Without even glancing at me, she said that's good, and continued walking without any trace of emotion. That made me feel a bit lonely, so I chased after her, bothered by her body language. What is it? You seem pretty depressed. Is there anything else on your mind? And when I said that, I remembered. Come to think of it, that day she said at that house...
Have you noticed?
Right. What did she notice at that time? I asked her, and she stopped. And then she slowly turned around and asked back,
Do you really want to hear?
I felt like those black, cold eyes would swallow me. And I heard something inside my urging me to stop. That I shouldn't learn any more, it warned. You can still turn back, said Yoichi. Oh, no.
You can still turn back,
said Yoichi.
You know what they say? If you peer from the side, they can see you too.
Krishna had said that as well, and I felt goosebumps. But I wonder why. That moment, I had a bizarre sense of excitement. That I wanted to see the world as she viewed it. That I wanted to stand where she stood. That I wanted to know why her words always seemed to sway my world. I'll listen. Tell me. When I said that, I was seeing things, or Yoshi seemed to have a slightly forlorn look. However, I would realize later that this was a fork. A story about wading in the bizarre and grotesque, helpless darkness of man. The boundary between the world and this world. The journey around the Ikoichi began this moment. After a moment, Yoichi nodded and then began speaking.
I was always wondering, what is it called? The house that grants wishes. Why? Yeah.
Why? Because...
The title lacks a subject. Whose wish?
And those words gave me chills. And I immediately began regretting my decision.
That house isn't a house of hope. I just felt an incredible source of malice.
Yoichi whispered, with the expression of a queen who'd been locked away in a dark castle alone for 1,000 years. Let's see.
The architecture disappeared while loving strange buildings. The countdown that began with 7. The mysterious space under the stairs. The house that grants wishes. There's a single answer that ties everything together.
My goosebumps wouldn't go away. What was she trying to say? What was about to show itself? The girl Yoichi's eyes glimmered as she spoke.
The architect is still inside those stairs.
Well, wait!
Of course he isn't alive, but then everything ties together.
Now I'm losing my voice. I need to drink another sip of water.
Why there's a meaningless space under the stairs, why it became named the house that grants wishes, and why the number begins with 7.
Wait, it doesn't explain anything. It didn't start from 7 because it was originally cross, and I had just coincidentally ran over and scratched.
Ron!
Her words twisted my world.
You originally wrote 10. You're right at that point. But there was never a scratch to begin with. Someone added a scratch and changed it to 7.
What? Why can you say that?
I saw.
What?
Now on top of your plus, someone had added a scratch to make it 7.
Then when Krishna said that there was no ghost in that house... And then Yoichi looked in the directions of the west wing with sadness.
There's no bare fortune in living with bliss.
Ha.
That is the person's kindness, and what I lack.
I was gonna go mad if I didn't laugh. You're lying, aren't you? You're making this all up, aren't you? Or is it that, in a cult story you read somewhere? I laughed, praying that there was the case. Yoichi gave me a sympathizing look, a grieving look.
Everything's the truth, because...
I could no longer respond, and Yoichi quietly landed the final blow.
When you were carried out, some man I'd never seen before was clicking his tongue.
I think under the stairs. As the world spun around me, Yoichi's cold, sweet voice reverberated. Welcome to the world.
Welcome to the world on this side.
Yai. And yes, I'm guessing that's why she puked on the ghost. Well, I think there's a second chapter to this visual novel, which I probably won't play right now, but that was intriguing. Catchy theme, too. I'm just kind of listening. Yoichi the ghost puker. Anyways, though. I mean, I kind of guessed when they were trying to give some other explanation that wasn't going to work like that. Especially since the girl showed signs. And again, the explanation that was given made absolutely no reasoning for the man. The man's appearance wasn't explained by the explanation. Anyways, those Seikaisha. Alright, I'm going to check something, though, if it is what I think it is. We're not going to play the second episode right now. This visual novel is actually more of a trailer or a teaser or an advertisement for a series of books, which are releasing in Japan. In fact, that's what probably in Japanese they're advertising to me right now, because this visual novel is based off of a current series in Japan, so yeah. Now then, click that. Gonna see, I think there's a second episode inside this, though. That was only the first episode. Stuff in Japanese I can't read. Though I feel like they're still illuminating on their books. Oh well. The art direction's nice. I believe it's actually the same artist who drew Seiya no Uda. I'm not certain. I don't know that for a fact, but the style was making me think of Seiya no Uda in a few places. But maybe not. Actually, the style is kind of different too. There's probably some other artists. I need to look into that. I like the art style, though. It worked very well for this. And there's some other book series that has nothing to do with what we just played. Alright. However, though... Oh, no, never mind. Those were the 2 chapters. And now for some reason, Cheese popped up on my list, because we played Fall. Right, we played Flow, and then we played Fall. What does this do? If I click it, it opens up the internet and tries to sell me the book. Yep, I knew it. There we go. And there's 2 books that you can get together for an low price of yai. Anyways, though, this has been Phenomeno. I'm kind of intrigued to get more into the series. It seems like something I'd probably enjoy. But with that, this has been this. Catch you guys next time.